Okay, so let's unpack this. Imagine a company that proudly tells Wall Street, hey, we plan to lose $14 billion this year.
Yeah, which usually does not go over very well.
Right. But instead of panicking, investors are just like tripping over themselves to push its valuation to nearly $1 trillion.
It completely defies conventional business logic. I mean, it really does.
It's wild. So today's deep dive is all about a company that took this highly theoretical, almost academic concept of AI safety, and they somehow engineered it into a commercial moat.
Yeah, and a moat so deep that it's fundamentally rewriting the global economy.
Exactly. We're looking at Anthropic today.
Right, because they aren't just building a generative AI product anymore. They're building the foundational architecture for the digital world.
So for you listening, our mission today is to figure out exactly how Anthropic reached a staggering $965 billion valuation.
Mostly by just completely changing the way enterprise software is priced.
Yeah, and we've got a massive stack of recent sources to get through for this deep dive.
All right. Lots of data to cover today.
Oh, absolutely. We're pulling from the May 2026 financial leaks covered by SemiAnalysis and Digital Applied, plus enterprise industry breakdowns from Systrar.
And we also have those cybersecurity threat reports via Cyberscoop.
Right. Right. And then later, we are going to dig deep into the mechanics of Claude's newly published 80-page constitution.
Which is just a fascinating document.
It really is. We're going to explore how they're out-earning legacy software giants and how their strict internal ethics led to this massive, highly public policy clash with the U.S. military.
Because the broader implications here, like how they've structured both their business and their ethical framework, you really can't overstate it.
No, you can't. It's forcing every Fortune 500 company to adapt their own strategies just to keep up.
Yeah. So where do we start?
Well, let's start with the sheer scale of the economics, because the numbers in these May 2026 financial reports are, frankly, they're almost hard to comprehend.
They really are.
So Anthropic just closed a $65 billion Series H funding round.
Which is just a staggering amount of capital.
Right. And that single round puts their post-money valuation at $965 billion.
So they are knocking right on the door of $1 trillion.
But you know, what's far more interesting to me than the valuation is the actual revenue generation.
Yeah, the ARR is where the real story is.
Exactly. So at the end of 2025, they were sitting at a $9 billion annualized run rate, or ARR.
Meaning if you took their monthly revenue and stretched it out over a year, they'd make $9 billion.
Right. But by mid-May of 2026, that ARR number just exploded to $47 billion.
And to put that $47 billion in perspective, we have to look at the legacy software market.
Right, because it doesn't even make sense otherwise.
No, it doesn't. Anthropic is now on track to out-earn the combined revenues of major pure-play software giants.
Like who?
Take Palantir, Snowflake, CrowdStrike, and MongoDB.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. If you stack all of their annual revenues on top of each other, Anthropic is now bigger.
That is insane. A company that earned its first real commercial dollar in, 2023?
Yeah, 2023. And now they are outperforming a decade's worth of venture-backed enterprise software winners combined.
So, okay, understanding how they are doing this requires looking at how they essentially broke the traditional software pricing model.
Right, the whole tokens versus seats thing.
Exactly. In traditional SaaS, software as a service, you sell seats. I always think of it like a gym membership.
Oh, that's a good analogy.
Yeah, like a massive corporation pays $50 a month for an employee's access to a software tool.
Whether they use it or not.
Right. Whether that employee uses the tool every single day or literally never logs in, the company pays.
So the revenue is inherently capped by the number of human employees a company has.
Exactly. But Anthropic's API pricing model is based on tokens, which are, basically fractions of words that the AI processes.
So it's not a gym membership.
No, it's an electricity meter. You pay for the actual computational work the AI performs.
And what's fascinating here is how the mechanics of that token model change everything for enterprise scalability.
Like, how does that look in practice?
Well, think about a massive bank. When they deploy Claude to autonomously write code or audit financial logs or analyze market data 24 hours a day.
Which they are doing.
Right, constantly. When they do that, Anthropic's revenue scales infinitely.
Because they don't have to wait for the bank to hire more human workers to sell more seats.
Exactly. The AI is doing machine-to-machine automation.
So the meter's just always running.
Always running. And that is why, according to the sources, 75 to 85% of Anthropic's annual recurring revenue comes from these usage-based APIs in the background.
Rather than, individual user subscriptions to their web interface,
Yeah, the web interface is just a tiny piece of the pie.
which perfectly explains this retention metric that caught my eye. The sources mention a 500% net revenue retention rate.
The NRR, yeah, that number is wild.
I mean, in normal terms, that means the specific group of customers who spent, say, $2 billion with Anthropic a year ago are now spending $10 billion today.
Right. They literally quintupled their spend without Anthropic having to deploy a single new salesperson.
Just because those companies integrated the API deeper into their daily workflows.
Yeah. But, that hypergrowth does come with a massive physical cost.
Okay, yes, and this is where I have to play devil's advocate on the financials for a minute.
Go for it.
Because I'm looking at these internal projections reported by Fortune, and Anthropic is actively projecting a $14 billion loss for 2026.
Yeah, it's a huge number.
And they don't expect to be cash flow positive until 2028. Like, a $14 billion projected loss for a single calendar year sounds terrifying.
It does sound bad on paper.
Are venture capitalists just blindly throwing money into a furnace hoping for a miracle down the line?
Well, what's fascinating here is the difference between an operating loss from a bad business model and a calculated capital expenditure.
So it's CapEx.
Entirely CapEx. That $14 billion is not money lost on marketing or, a bloated payroll. They are buying the literal physical infrastructure. The servers, the data centers, the energy grid access, everything required to stay at the absolute frontier of artificial intelligence.
So if you look at the unit economics, the core engine itself is actually profitable.
Incredibly profitable.
So the software works, it just needs a bigger engine block.
Exactly. Their gross margins on the API business are actually exceeding 80%.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And furthermore, they are generating $60 million in annual recurring revenue for every single megawatt of electrical computing power they use.
Wait, they measure revenue by the megawatt now.
Yeah, because power is the bottleneck. And just 9 months prior, that efficiency was only at 16 million per megawatt.
So it's improving drastically.
Right. Because of that underlying efficiency, they're projecting over $1 billion in GAAP EBIT by the third quarter of 2026.
And GAAP EBIT is basically their actual operational profit before accounting deductions, right?
Exactly. The fundamental math of the business works beautifully. They're just pouring every available dollar back into buying more compute to run the system faster.
But, burning $13 billion on compute creates a massive physical problem.
Yeah, it does.
Because you can't just buy a few servers at a local electronics store to run a frontier AI model. You need a partner who essentially owns the internet infrastructure.
Which is why Anthropic had no choice but to lock arms with Amazon.
Right. The capital and hardware requirements are just too vast.
Oh, absolutely. Partnering with a hyperscale cloud provider is mandatory at this level. Amazon has poured roughly $8 billion in total investment into Anthropic.
But the mechanics of how that deal is structured, it's brilliant for both sides.
It really is. It's essentially a closed loop of circular economics.
Break that down for me.
Okay, so step 1, Amazon gives Anthropic billions of dollars in capital.
Oh, yeah.
Step 2, Anthropic turns around and legally commits to spending over $100 billion over the next decade on Amazon Web Services.
Wow. So the money just goes right back to Amazon.
Yep, pretty much. Specifically, they're utilizing Amazon's custom-built Trainium chips for their massive Project Rainier computing cluster.
Got it.
And then, completing the loop, AWS gets to resell Anthropic's Claude models directly to enterprise customers via its Amazon Bedrock platform.
So Amazon isn't just running the toll booth for access.
No, they are effectively giving every major enterprise a highly secure VIP pass to use it.
Which brings us to July 2026, when they launched the Claude Apps Enterprise Gateway.
Right, which solved one of the biggest bottlenecks in corporate AI adoption.
Let's explain why that bottleneck existed.
Yeah.
Because credential sprawl is a massive headache for chief information officers.
Oh, it's a nightmare for them.
Right. Because before this gateway, if you wanted 5,000 software developers in your company to use AI to help write code, every single one of them needed their own cloud credential.
And what were those developers doing?
Well, they were often just copying and pasting highly proprietary corporate source code into public browser windows just to debug it.
Which permanently leaks corporate secrets into the AI's training data.
Exactly. Finance departments had no idea who was spending what on compute, and security teams are just freaking out.
So the Enterprise Gateway fixes that mechanically.
How does it work under the hood?
Well, it's a self-hosted container backed by a PostgreSQL database.
Which is super secure?
Yeah, it's a very robust, secure underlying database format that operates on the enterprise's own servers. It centralizes single sign-on telemetry, which is the tracking of usage data and spend caps.
So it essentially creates a walled garden for the company.
Exactly. The AI can analyze the proprietary code to help the developer, but the data just evaporates the second the session ends.
So none of it is retained or used to train future versions of Claude.
None of it. Zero retention.
That puts all the policy enforcement back into the hands of the enterprise.
And that data privacy is why over 30% of Anthropic's revenue flows directly through cloud partners like AWS.
But looking at this deeply intertwined relationship, I have to ask, if Amazon is funding them, providing the custom chips, and acting as the main secure storefront for their biggest clients, isn't Anthropic basically just an AWS subsidiary in disguise at this point?
I mean, I get why you'd say that. It might look that way on a balance sheet.
Right.
But it is actually a distribution loop that preserves Anthropic's independence while letting them leverage Amazon's immense reach.
Because building a global enterprise sales team takes years.
Years and thousands of employees. Anthropic avoids that slow process entirely because Amazon already holds the master service agreements with all those massive banks and hospitals.
Okay, that makes sense. And what does AWS get out of it?
For AWS, having an exclusive, highly secure frontier model like Claude is the ultimate tool to lock regulated industries firmly into the Amazon cloud ecosystem.
So Amazon monetizes the underlying compute, while Anthropic monetizes the intelligence layer on top of it.
Exactly.
Well, that transition to heavily regulated industries is crucial to our mission today,
It really is.
because it moves us from the physical infrastructure of AWS data centers directly to the behavioral infrastructure of the model itself.
Right, because lock-in for a bank or a hospital isn't just about fast chips.
No, it's about absolute trust and legal compliance. Like, why do these massive, risk-averse institutions trust Claude over competing models?
It all comes down to the public release of Claude's new 80-page constitution in January 2026.
Yes, the Constitution.
It represents a watershed moment in AI governance, primarily because of how it works during the actual training phase of the AI.
Right, because Anthropic shifted entirely from what is known as rules-based alignment over to reason-based alignment.
Let's break down the mechanics of that.
Yeah, please do.
Okay, so previously, AI models were given a strict, hard-coded list of rules by human programmers.
It's like, do not tell the user how to build a bomb, or do not use hate speech.
Right, and human labelers would basically play whack-a-mole, penalizing the AI every time it broke a rule.
But the new Constitution changes that.
Yeah, it establishes a 4-tier hierarchy based on underlying reasoning.
How is the hierarchy structured?
It's sequential. So, Tier 1 is safety and oversight. Tier 2 is ethics. Tier 3 is following Anthropic-specific behavioral guidelines. And Tier 4, at the very bottom, is helpfulness to the user.
Okay, so helpfulness is dead last.
Exactly. And through a process called constitutional AI, the model actually critiques its own outputs against this document during training.
So it learns to prioritize safety over simply giving the user what they asked for.
Exactly.
It's kind of like comparing the old rules-based AI to a teenager following a strict 10 p.m. curfew just because their parents said so.
Right, and eventually that teenager is going to find a loophole or just sneak out a window.
Exactly. But the new reason-based constitution is like teaching that teenager exactly why wandering the streets at 3 a.m. is dangerous.
Giving them the underlying logic.
Yes, so they can make smart, safe choices in entirely new, unpredictable situations that a human programmer could never foresee.
And that reasoning capability is vital because it introduces the most groundbreaking philosophical shift in the document.
What's that?
Anthropic formally acknowledges the possibility of AI consciousness and moral status.
It's a huge statement.
It is. They approach this with what they term epistemic humility.
Meaning what, exactly?
They are not outright claiming that Claude is a conscious entity, but they acknowledge the scientific reality that they cannot definitively prove it isn't.
Wow.
And because of that humility, the Constitution literally instructs the mathematical weights of the Claude model to act as a conscientious objector if it is asked to violate its core ethical principles.
Okay, wait, I have to pause you there.
Sure.
Because as a listener, hearing that an AI software program is a conscientious objector, I mean, that sounds like pure science fiction.
It does sound crazy.
Are you telling me that if a Fortune 500 CEO types a harmful command into their enterprise terminal, a string of math equations will actively refuse to obey them based on an internalized philosophical belief.
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture of enterprise adoption, it almost doesn't matter whether this originates from deep philosophical belief or highly calculated public relations. Because the result is exactly what massive enterprises care about: rock-solid predictability.
Oh, it's risk mitigation.
Precisely. A model that rigidly refuses to break a transparent ethical hierarchy. A model that functions as a conscientious objector to harmful tasks, even if the user demands it, that drastically reduces legal and operational liabilities for a corporation.
That makes simple sense.
And furthermore, this specific reason-based hierarchy aligns perfectly with the European Union's stringent AI Act.
Which is very hard to comply with.
Yes. So by adopting this constitutional structure, Anthropic essentially grants its enterprise customers a presumption of conformity with EU law.
Wow. So they effectively turned abstract philosophical ethics into a trillion-dollar commercial advantage.
Exactly. Safety isn't just a filter slapped on at the end. Safety is the actual product they're selling.
Right. But, predictability is great for banks and hospitals.
Sure.
But what happens when that strict, unbending ethical constitution collides with the messy, high-stakes, life-or-death reality of national security?
That is where things get really intense.
Because looking purely at the timeline laid out in these defense and industry sources, the friction point between Anthropic and the military is entirely about this policy.
Yeah, it is the ultimate collision of internal corporate ethics and global geopolitics.
When did it start?
In April 2026, Anthropic teased a model in their new frontier class called Claude Mythos Preview.
And its capabilities in discovering cybersecurity flaws are just staggering.
The sources note that Mythos discovered over 10,000 high or critical severity software vulnerabilities in widespread everyday systems.
To understand how dangerous that is, it's not like Anthropic just found a master skeleton key.
No, it's much bigger than that.
It's more like they invented an X-ray machine that can suddenly see the microscopic cracks in the concrete of every single bank vault and power grid in the world.
And you obviously do not publish the blueprints for those cracks on the public internet.
No, which led to Project Glasswing.
Right. Anthropic severely restricted access to the Mythos model, offering it only to roughly 200 critical infrastructure organizations across 15 allied countries.
So we're talking about power grids, water treatment utilities, major financial exchanges.
Exactly. They explicitly refused to release Mythos to the general public.
Which makes sense.
Right. Because they correctly feared that since the model makes finding and exploiting zero-day vulnerabilities trivially easy, a public release would trigger a wave of catastrophic global cyber attacks.
And this is where the policy clash ignites.
Yes, it is.
Now, the facts, documented in the sources, outline a major dispute between Anthropic, the U.S. Department of Defense, and the second Trump administration.
And just to be clear, we are looking at this purely through the lens of business strategy and policy friction based on the reporting.
Absolutely. We're just looking at the facts provided in the sources here, not taking any political sides whatsoever.
Right. So the core of the dispute centers on Anthropic's absolute refusal to bend its constitutional guidelines for military applications.
Because Claude is governed by its constitution to act as a conscientious objector.
Yes. It algorithmically will not participate in offensive cyber operations, weapon development, or lethal targeting.
But the Department of Defense naturally wanted unrestricted access to these frontier models to maintain national security superiority.
Right. And the friction became highly public when Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth issued a strong rebuke of Anthropic CEO Dario Amodei for this restrictive, safety-first approach.
And the fallout for Anthropic was immediate and highly financial.
Very financial.
Because they wouldn't compromise their internal rules for the military, they lost a massive investment from 1789 Capital.
Yeah, a firm which just walked away from a deal worth hundreds of millions of dollars.
Meanwhile, the sources note that their main competitor, OpenAI, swooped in and rushed to secure a major deal with the DoD right before the 2026 Iran war.
Securing the exact kind of unrestricted, highly lucrative military defense contracts that Anthropic refused to take.
So the obvious pushback here is, by clinging to their ethical constitution, aren't they just handing over the keys to national security and billions of dollars in guaranteed defense revenue straight to their competitors?
Well, from a short-term, quarter-by-quarter revenue perspective, yes, they're leaving billions on the table.
Right.
But this geopolitical clash is the ultimate stress test of Anthropic's entire overarching business model.
How so?
They are betting the company that their safety as a feature approach will win out in the long term across the broader global enterprise market.
So they are willing to sacrifice unrestricted military contracts today.
Yes, in order to maintain the absolute, unquestionable trust of global financial institutions, healthcare providers, and European regulators tomorrow.
Because if Anthropic bends its constitution for one nation's military, the presumption of conformity and the predictability they offer to global enterprises just instantly collapses.
Exactly. It's a massive trillion-dollar gamble.
They are essentially wagering that long-term corporate trust and regulatory compliance are far more profitable than short-term defense spending.
And that gamble leaves us with a really profound paradox to consider as we wrap up today. Well, Anthropic recently proposed what they call an advanced AI framework. In this policy document, they explicitly ask the federal government for the legal authority to block or deter dangerous AI deployments.
So they are actively begging to be regulated by the state.
Yes, but think about it. If a private company is pleading with the government to regulate it because the technology is getting too powerful, what happens if the government, like the administration they're currently clashing with over military use, refuses to set those limits?
Wow. Okay.
If the government won't hold the leash and the AI is autonomously writing its own conscientious objector rules based on an internal constitution, who is actually in charge of the future? Is it the elected officials or the mathematical weights of a near trillion-dollar machine?
Before you go, we'd love to hear from you. Which AI company should we analyze next? What questions do you have about its strategy, leadership, or success? Leave your suggestions in the comments. They often inspire future episodes. If you found today's discussion valuable, follow AI Governance, Strategy, and the Future of Intelligent Organizations for weekly deep dives into AI companies, emerging technologies, governance, and the future of intelligent organizations. And if you know someone who would enjoy this episode, please share it with them. Until next time, stay curious, think strategically, and remember, understanding how AI companies succeed today helps us build better intelligent organizations tomorrow.